Subscribe to the channel and hear even more exciting stories. My in-laws tried to control my life until I made the boldest move. Hi Reddit. Throwaway for obvious reasons. But honestly, if my in-laws ever find this, I hope they learn a thing or two about boundaries. Spoiler, they won't. I, 29F, have spent the last 3 years tangled up with my husband's family. A set of people who, on paper, look like the poster family for, "We support you, sweetie," and in real life operate more like an HOA with delusions of royalty. I met my husband, Mark, 31M, in grad school. He's sweet, bookish, the type of guy who apologizes if he bumps into a chair. From day one, he made it clear that his parents, especially his mom, were really involved in his life. At first, I thought it was cute. He called his mom every Sunday, sent his dad new podcasts to listen to, even let his little sister crash on our couch for weeks when she needed a break. I thought, okay, they're close. Maybe a bit much, but it's nice he cares. Looking back, there were warning signs I missed, like how his mom, Linda, sent me helpful links to articles about how to be a good wife before we were even engaged, or how his dad, Frank, used to quiz me about my job and finances at family dinners, then accidentally mention how much more Mark was earning. Mark always laughed it off, but even his sister rolled her eyes. There was a sense that, to be accepted, I had to be the right kind of person, career-driven, but not too ambitious, supportive, but never opinionated, close to family, but always deferential to theirs. Still, I told myself every family has quirks, and as long as Mark had my back, I could handle a little meddling. Reader, I could not. I thought I was marrying Mark. I didn't realize I was also marrying the family expectations industrial complex. I never guessed just how far they'd go to run my life, or how much I'd have to lose before I fought back. The turning point, the moment I finally understood how deep the rabbit hole went, came about 6 months before our wedding. Up to that point, Linda had helped me pick out my dress, translation, vetoed everything that wasn't white and modest. Frank had offered advice on our honeymoon budget, translation, demanded spreadsheets. And Mark's sister, Tara, volunteered to be my maid of honor, translation, announced it in front of everyone before I'd even asked my own best friend. But what really broke the illusion was an email I was never meant to see. I was helping Linda with the seating chart, because apparently nobody else in the world knew how to alphabetize, when a notification popped up on her laptop, an email from her to Mark, subject line, Operation Wedding. I know, I shouldn't have peeked. But if you'd spent as many Sundays as I had being grilled on napkin colors and family-friendly playlists, you'd understand. The email was a blow-by-blow plan to encourage me to change jobs. Her hours are so long. How will she ever be a good wife? To make sure we bought a house in the right neighborhood, read, 5 minutes from theirs, and to gently push my parents out of the planning so they don't feel left out when it's just family. The kicker? Linda had actually included a script for Mark to use if I objected, complete with suggested facial expressions and gentle arm touches. I stared at that screen, my heart pounding, not sure whether to laugh, cry, or pack a bag. I realized then that the little comments, the helpful advice, the financial nosiness, none of it was accidental. It was all a campaign, a coordinated, years-long campaign to turn me into the perfect extension of their family narrative. I closed the laptop, hands shaking, and realized I was dealing with something way bigger than just a meddling mother-in-law. This was control, plain and simple. And for the first time, I started to wonder if Mark had any idea how far they were willing to go, or if, deep down, he was okay with it. I left Linda's house with a smile that could have cracked concrete and the kind of stomachache you only get from swallowing your own rage. All the way home, I kept replaying that email in my head. Operation Wedding. The audacity. Was I just a project? A Barbie doll for them to dress up, pose, and micromanage? Back at our apartment, Mark was lounging on the couch, oblivious to the existential crisis brewing inside me. I tried to bring it up gently, asking if he'd noticed his mom pushing a bit too hard. He shrugged and said, "That's just how she is. She wants everything to be perfect. Try not to take it personally." He even grinned, like it was all harmless fun. That stung more than I expected. I wanted him to be shocked, outraged on my behalf. Instead, he patted my hand and suggested we order takeout. Meanwhile, my head was spinning. Did he know about the emails? Was he playing along? Or just totally naive? I realized how isolated I'd become. My own parents were frustrated by the constant suggestions, but didn't want to stir up drama. My best friend was still confused about why Tara was made of honor instead of her, and honestly, so was I. Anger bloomed under the hurt. What gave them the right to script my life? I'd bent over backwards to make everyone happy, downplaying my own needs, always giving them the benefit of the doubt. Now, the mask was off. I saw their love for what it was, a tool, a weapon, something used to shape me into their perfect daughter-in-law. I felt betrayed. By them, by Mark's passivity, maybe even by myself for letting it go on this long. I realized I was at a crossroads. Stay quiet and play along, or finally start pushing back. That night, I couldn't sleep. But for the first time, I started to imagine what it would feel like to stand up for myself, even if it meant losing everything I tried so hard to build. The next morning, I woke up determined to stop doubting myself. I needed to know just how deep this control went. So, I started digging, not in a sneaky, supervillain way, but in the a woman pushed too far way. I asked my parents if they'd noticed anything weird. Turns out, Linda had called my mom the week before, suggesting that it would be easier if my side of the family handled the rehearsal dinner, while hers did the ceremony. Tradition, she'd insisted. My mom, bless her, said she'd felt like a supporting actress at her own daughter's wedding. I reached out to my best friend, the one I'd wanted as my maid of honor. She admitted that Tara had cornered her at a bridal shop and told her it was family tradition for siblings to take center stage. Then I checked our joint savings account, money Mark and I had set aside for whatever we want, and saw several withdrawals I didn't recognize, all to consultants Linda had recommended. The final straw came when I found a group text between Mark, his parents, and Tara labeled the family plan. Inside, discussions about where we'd live, when we'd start having kids, as soon as possible. She's almost 30. Even who would host Christmas for the next 3 years. It was like reading minutes from a board meeting where I was the main agenda item, but never invited. My anger shifted to a cold clarity. I confronted Mark with the receipts, the texts, the email. He looked genuinely shocked for a minute. Then he got defensive, mumbling about just wanting to keep the peace and not wanting to upset anyone. It hit me then. Mark wasn't clueless. He was complicit, even if he didn't realize how much it was costing me. I felt like I'd been living in a play, reciting lines handed to me by people who barely cared who I was, as long as I played my part. But I also felt something new, a spark of stubbornness, a sense that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to let them write my story. The confrontation was less a single dramatic showdown and more like an emotional demolition derby spread over a week. First came the big one, dinner at Linda and Frank's house. I walked in with copies of the emails, text threads, and bank withdrawals. My hands were shaking, but my voice, finally, was steady. I started by calmly saying I knew about the family plan chat. The room went dead silent. Linda immediately launched into her favorite hits. "We only want what's best for you. You're too sensitive. It's just tradition." Frank chimed in about family unity, while Tara managed to look both smug and offended, a true Olympic-level performance. I laid it all out, how I knew about the withdrawals, the wedding sabotage, the attempts to isolate me from my parents and friends. I told them I was tired of being managed, molded, and treated like a prop in their family play. I said if they wanted a doll, they could buy one. If they wanted a daughter-in-law, they needed to respect me as a person. Mark sat frozen at the table. He tried to defend them at first. They're just trying to help. But when I turned to him, asked if he was my husband or their son first, he just went quiet. Linda started to cry, but even her tears felt like another tactic, reminding everyone she's the victim whenever she doesn't get her way. The tension was suffocating. Frank tried to shift blame to me, saying I was creating drama over nothing. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I stood up, told them I would not be attending any more meetings, dinners, or group chats unless I was treated like an equal adult in this family. I told Mark, quietly but firmly, that our relationship was at a crossroads. He could either set boundaries with them, or I would. I left without dessert, but with more self-respect than I'd felt in years. The emotional fallout hit me harder than I'd expected. In the days after the confrontation, my phone buzzed nonstop. Linda sending long, guilt-trippy texts. I only wanted you to feel loved. You've misunderstood everything. Tara posting passive-aggressive memes about disloyalty in the family group chat, and Frank emailing Mark with strategies for handling my tantrum. Mark was lost. He tiptoed around me, avoiding hard conversations, as if silence could fix the cracks that had formed. When he did speak, he kept saying, "Can't we just move on?" But there's no moving on when you haven't actually moved anywhere. I felt alone in my own apartment, like the air itself had been replaced with a kind of heavy, silent judgment. My parents tried to support me, but admitted they felt powerless, not wanting to cause more drama. My best friend checked in every day, reminding me I wasn't crazy, that setting boundaries was necessary, not selfish. Still, I questioned myself constantly. Was I blowing things out of proportion? Should I just let it go for the sake of family peace? Would I regret standing up for myself if it meant losing Mark? I started having trouble sleeping, replaying every awkward family dinner, every time I'd bitten my tongue just to keep things easy. I realized how much of myself I'd been willing to shrink for the comfort of others, how often I'd made myself small to fit their expectations. The hardest part was facing Mark's indecision. I needed him to choose a partnership with me or the status quo with his family. But every time he hesitated, it felt like another betrayal. Underneath the anxiety, though, something was changing. Every boundary I set, every moment I refused to engage in their drama, made me feel just a bit stronger. I started to understand. You don't owe anyone your silence, especially when they're the ones crossing the line. At some point, exhaustion transformed into clarity. I realized that waiting for Mark to defend me was a dead end. I had to be my own advocate. So, I made the boldest move of my life. I booked a weekend away, alone, no explanations or apologies. I left a note for Mark. I need space to think. I hope you use this time to think too. Then I turned off my phone and drove to a little cabin by the lake. For 48 hours, I sat with my own thoughts. No drama, no group chats, no guilt. I wrote in my journal, cried, walked in the woods, and made a list of what I wanted in a marriage, in a family, in myself. Spoiler, constantly defending my worth didn't make the cut. When I got back, Mark was waiting. I told him, calmly, that if things didn't change, I was ready to postpone the wedding, or walk away completely. I told him I deserved a partner, not a mediator between me and his parents. He was silent for a long time, then finally admitted he'd been scared to stand up to his family his whole life. We agreed on boundaries. No more family group chats unless I wanted in. No decisions about our lives without both of us agreeing. Linda lost her wedding planning privileges, and I reclaimed my choice for maid of honor. Sorry, Tara. Mark started going to therapy, not just for us, but to untangle his own childhood wiring. Linda and Frank didn't take the changes well. There were tears, ultimatums, even a few weeks of total radio silence. I won't pretend it was easy, or that they magically respected my autonomy overnight. But I stuck to my boundaries, and Mark, for the first time, stood next to me instead of behind me. The best part? I started to feel like myself again. Not the scared, shrinking woman they wanted, but the bold, complicated, stubborn person I'd always been before I let anyone script my life. Setting those boundaries triggered a chain reaction I didn't expect. At first, the silence from Mark's family felt almost peaceful. I could breathe in my own apartment without dreading a quick check-in visit or a barrage of constructive texts. But then, things started shifting in ways I hadn't imagined. For one, Mark changed. Therapy helped him finally say out loud that he'd spent his whole life trying to keep his parents happy. And that, somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten how to be his own person. He apologized, not just in words, but in actions. Cooking dinner, planning date nights, even defending me in the group chat the first time Linda tried to reinsert herself. We make our own decisions now, Mom. Please respect that. It was like watching him wake up from a long sleep. Linda tried every guilt trip in the book. Surprise visits, long voicemails about family values, even mailing me a book titled The Art of Compromise. I nearly mailed her back a copy of Boundaries for Dummies. Frank, meanwhile, went radio silent except for an awkward birthday card. Tara posted a cryptic meme about losing sisters to outsiders, and then blocked me on Instagram. For the first time, their drama felt less like a hurricane and more like background noise. But the real turning point was what happened with my own family and friends. Freed from the pressure to play nice, I invited my parents and best friend back into the wedding planning. We laughed about napkin colors and danced in my living room to ridiculous playlists. I remembered what joy felt like, what it meant to celebrate with people who loved me for me. The most surprising support came from a cousin of Mark's, who messaged to say she'd always felt like an outsider and admired me for standing up. "You don't owe anyone your happiness," she wrote. For the first time, I actually believed it. Our wedding looked different than planned, but so did I. Stronger, clearer, more myself than I'd felt in years. In the end, the dust settled in ways I could never have predicted. Mark and I got married, but on our own terms. The guest list shrank. The ceremony was simple, heartfelt, and mine, not a performance, not a committee project, just two flawed people choosing each other in front of the people who truly mattered. Linda and Frank came, but they sat quietly in the third row, not front and center. Tara skipped the wedding, which honestly stung less than I expected. Mark's parents mostly kept to themselves, clearly sulking over their lost control, but the sense of threat was gone. I realized I could coexist with their disappointment and not have it swallow me whole. Afterward, the dynamic shifted. Linda still tried her old tricks, but I got better at saying no, thank you, and letting her tantrums roll off my back. The family group chat became quieter. Mark held the line beside me, sometimes awkwardly, but always with effort. There were no more secret plans or helpful emails. If they slipped, I called it out, calmly but firmly. The power they once held faded with every ignored guilt trip. My own relationships flourished. My parents and best friend became a bigger part of my daily life again. Mark and I went to counseling, worked on communicating, really communicating, not just smoothing things over. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were still hard days, moments I doubted whether it was all worth it. But I could finally look in the mirror and see someone who'd chosen her own life, not just inherited someone else's blueprint. Our marriage isn't perfect, but it's ours, built not on scripts or obligation, but on boundaries and honesty. And for the first time, I truly believe that's enough. Now, standing on the other side of it all, I'm honestly amazed at how much I grew, how much strength I found in places I never thought to look. For years, I thought being agreeable and accommodating was the secret to harmony, but all it ever did was silence my own needs and make me a background character in my own story. It took a family crisis, heartbreak, and the risk of losing everything to realize what I truly deserve: respect, partnership, and the right to make my own choices, even if that disappoints people who think they know best. If you're reading this and living with controlling in-laws or toxic family dynamics, please know you're not overreacting and you're not alone. It's so easy to believe that keeping the peace is more important than speaking up, or that love means sacrificing your voice. But peace that comes at the expense of your well-being isn't peace, it's surrender. I learned that drawing boundaries isn't selfish. It's how you make room for real love and real connection. I learned that people who love you won't ask you to make yourself smaller, and that anyone who does isn't really rooting for you. The truth is, you don't owe anyone your silence. You don't have to earn your place by being perfect or by living up to someone else's blueprint for your life. You get to decide what matters, and you get to build a future that feels true for you, even if that means being called difficult by people who never plan to see you as anything more than an accessory. It isn't easy. There are still moments when I second-guess myself, or when the old guilt creeps in. But most days now, I look around and feel free. I know I stood up for myself. I chose a path that's messy, honest, and mine. And that's the advice I'd give to anyone in my shoes. Trust yourself, honor your boundaries, and don't be afraid to be the main character in your own life. You are worth it, always.